Hello friends, I've recorded a vlog about our recording process, or a little bit about our recording process, mostly about the mid-side technique that we use for the room mics, because I've been asked about it a lot. So I thought I'd do that. I've edited up the video and I've just watched it back and I've realised there's a couple of things I probably haven't explained as much as I could, so I'm going to do that ahead of the video. First and foremost, I'm not a recording expert, never went to a recording school, never produced any albums. So everything that I know has been taught to me by friends, stuff that I've looked up online and stuff that we've learned in the day-to-day process of TPS. So just one opinion in the many. Second, what else didn't I explain? How am I recording what you're hearing? Here it is, the dear old Zoom H6, which was the thing that recorded pretty much all of the TPS episodes up until we got the Universal Audio Apollo 8Ps. This thing is awesome. I do all my location recording with it when I can't take the UA stuff. So what you're hearing is a stereo feed from the UA plus an extra voice mic for what I'm talking about. So that's how it's being recorded, what you're hearing. Therefore, you're probably not getting the full-on banging UA audio quality because it's hitting these mic preamps in addition to whatever's happening in the UA. So just to explain that. Headphones. Beyerdynamic DT880 Pros, which are my main mixing headphones these days. You might remember if you watched the first videos that I used to use these Sennheiser HD25s. I still do. They're a very lovely headphone to listen to for music especially, but they are a little bit coloured, especially in the bass. So what I've learned over the last 6 or 8 months of using these DT880 Pros is I can get a mix now which sounds kind of similar on both sets of cans. That certainly wasn't the case before that. And I do that. I've also got some Shures over there that I might have a listen to as well, just to try and get a reasonable balance. Headphones, done. I refer in the video to room mics, amp mics, and voice mics, just to make that absolutely clear. The amp mics are on the amps, the room mics are at the back of the room, that's what I'm talking about with the mid-side, and the voice mics are above our heads. And the way they get mixed is manually. I literally sit there and manually duck, put them up and down as we speak, as the guitar amps happen, and Simon does a bit of that too. I think that's it. So enjoy this video. There's some interesting stuff in it. Be very appreciative of your comments, questions that we'll answer perhaps in a separate VCQ. But yeah, for now, enjoy this. I hope it's of use for those people who have asked for it. I'm just going to say again, I'm not an audio expert, all right? So go easy on me. Okay, see you soon. We mentioned in a recent VCQ about the mid-side technique we use on the room mics. So I'll explain that, but also just give you a quick whistle-stop tour to the audio process since we did the first behind-the-scenes video. Goodness knows how long ago that was. Everything's changed since then. So to explain what's happening here, there's a camera here. Hello, pointing at a screen there, because I think I can only do one screen recording at a time. Don't know, but anyway, just in case. There's a camera pointing at my face. This is the corner of that pedal shed that you don't see very much, or Shangri-La, or whatever we're going to call it. This is up the other end. I'll pan around in a minute and show you some sort of situational shots so that you can see what it looks like at this end. As promised then, a little tour of the thing. You know this because you see it every week. I'll get out of the way. The studio. Hang on, zoom out a bit. You know that. So if I come back here and point back that way, that's what you see looking down the other end of the room with the lights, the camera, and there's the old audio station over there. You know all about this. Okay, that probably makes you feel quite sick. Oh, there's pedal cam. And then, so they point down at our stools, and you know all about our stools, that's where we sit. And then, so if you look back from the main camera position, zoomed into about there, that's what you normally see, or thereabouts, on that pedal show. Pan up, you can see the rigging and the light. So, as I said, back here, the audio workstation, which is where I sit to do the audio. For demonstration purposes, I'm going to use the recent Strymon Volante video that we did because there's some cool sounds in there, and it sort of explains what's going on. So first of all, let's open up Logic, and then I need to do a screen recording. Okay, there we go. Let's just record the Logic window, which is this. Start recording. Start recording. I'm going to assume it's recording. Okay, what you can see down the left-hand side here are the tracks, the mix vocal, Dan's vocal, 2 microphones on each amp, so Supro Neumann, Supro Sennheiser, Boogie Neumann, Boogie Sennheiser, room mid, room left, and room side right. I'll come on to that in a minute. Voices. Voices end up hitting the recorder via this. It's a plugin, it's a Universal Audio plugin which works on our Apollo 8P interfaces called the Manley Voxbox, and that gives us a load of gain, as you can see, gives us a bit of compression, and it also gives us a de-essing filter around about 9K, which is the worst offender for S's as far as Dan and I are concerned. So that happens at the input. You can't change that post. That's one of the unison preamp functions that the Apollo 8P has, which is great. And then in addition to that, sometimes I'll add something like a Teletronics LA2 to give it a bit of sizzle and presence and stuff, but I won't concentrate too much on the voices today. What you can see in the voices is people always say, why don't you leave the voice mics up when you're playing the guitar? We don't leave the voice mics up when we're playing the guitar because they sound like this. Whereas the mics on the amp sound like this. Don't want to listen to that too much. The voice mics are gained up so much that the amps just completely blow them out. So, right, let's move on to guitar amps. As I mentioned to you, there are 2 microphones on each amp. The way that works is I'll have a listen to them, usually pick the one that sounds the best and mix the other one in for a bit of colour. Now I'm really missing our Royer R121 ribbon, which we had lent to us by a friend, Jacques, hello Jacques, which we had to give back to him. So there's hopefully more Royers on the way and possibly some Sontronics ribbons. I want to go back to the ribbons because as much as we love the E906's dynamic mics and use them for loads of the early TPS shows, they just sound harsh to me these days in this recording environment. Great live mic. Here's the 2 mics on the Supro. And the 2 mics on the Boogie. And when you mix them together, quite often get asked about how they're panned. So I'll just show you that. Show you the pans for each. How that works. So what you were hearing, if you look on the screen here, all the way up, all the way through the show, they were panned +7, -7, right? So the Supro is slightly to the right, the Boogie is slightly to the left, and it sounds like this. And then when we came on to discuss the stereo aspects of the Volante, I mentioned in the video that I was going to pan them hard right and left, and you can see here, right where the cursor is at the moment, that's where it goes from being panned just a little bit left and right to a lot left and right, and you go from this to this. Very lovely. So that's a real whistle-stop tour of different mics on different cabs. Actually, while we're there, let's go back onto the volume aspect again. Now, so here's the Supro Neumann on its own. And then I added the Sennheiser in on top. So they're doing quite different jobs in terms of frequency response. And what I'll aim to do is kind of prioritize one of the microphones and mix the other one in for color. So then those are the two Supros, and I'll let that play, and then I'll just add the boogie on top. So what you end up with there is quite a huge sound, actually. If you were recording a track, maybe that would be too much information because it's really full frequency and thick and fat and full. If you were layering those guitars in a track, you probably want to strip some of that extra meat out and just have a more direct source. Anyway, what we're aiming for here is, you know, as full a sound as possible. To wit, the mid-side configuration. Okay, so I'll just show you what that looks like now. The microphones are up there above my head. It's going to be quite dark, so please bear with me. Up there are the mid-side mics, C414XLs, right? And they sit up there, and that's the mid-side. Because they're dual diaphragm, one is set to cardioid and points forward, and the other is set to figure 8 and points side to side. I might just take one of them off and show you that in detail. So, because it's a dual diaphragm microphone, wow, look at this. One points forward, straight at you, set to cardioid, and the other points left, right like that, set to figure 8. That is mid-side miking. Right at the back of the room. They may not be optimally positioned. Should experiment with that, but despite what you might think, we don't have hours and hours and hours to kind of tear our hearts out about production techniques. It's just not possible with the way that the show is run and all the rest of it. But I put them there, they sound pretty good. And this is what you get. So I'm just going to backtrack a little bit. Let's come onto this screen again. When those microphones arrive, there's two microphones, right? So this one isn't there. So that one's not there at all, so we get rid of that. Track, delete. When they come in, you get the mid, which is the mic that points forward, and you get the side, room side, which is the one that kind of points that way, across the room. And because they're dual diaphragm condenser microphones, you've got a diaphragm that points in either direction, right? So you can do cardioid pattern, which is just in front of the mic. You can do hypercardioid or supercardioid, which is a smaller version of that. Or you can do figure 8, which is both sides of that capsule taking sound from both sides. Still mono, but that's what it's doing, right? So let's put them both at 0 dB. What you saw on the original amp mics, so the main amplifier mics, is I use this plugin, which is a UAD model of a Neve 1073, which is a very famous microphone preamp, and I use it because the EQ is in just a lovely, lovely, lovely place. the highs just. So let's hear it on, what have we got there? That's probably not a very good example. Let's try it on the Supro Sennheiser, right? So here's the Supro. And when they're all mixed together, normally what happens is, unusually there was a lot of high end happening in that video. I normally roll on a little 3.2, which is a nice kind of upper mid into treble frequency that is quite cutting and crisp. And then I also usually roll on a bit of presency high end as well. But in this one, there happened to be like a load of high end. Maybe it was the way I put the mics on the speakers or something like that, but there was a lot of high end, so I ended up taking some off, as you can see, a couple of dB there. And then you get each microphone sounding as you might like, and then when you add the others in, it all changes. You normally get like a bass coupling thing, so there's usually some 50 hertz to roll off or some bass to roll off. Anyway, I'm not going to get too much into the specifics of EQ because it changes every session, and we don't do any serious EQing in terms of changing the tone. We do it just so that it sounds more or less what we remember in the room. Okay, sorry, that was a bit of a tangent. Back to these mid-side mics, right? So the room mid mic, the one that points forward again. So where I used the 1073 on the amp mics, I use this Neve 1081 on the room mics because it's got a little bit more sculptable EQ, and again I tend to roll some high end on here, so this one sounds a bit woolly. Okay, that's the room mid mic, and you hear that once I've EQ'd it, I've shelved it at 92 hertz, so take off quite a lot of the bass, taken some of the low mid hump out, which is a problem in this room, and added on some 10k and some 3.3k to give it a bit more presence, right? So that's that room mid mic, and then what I'll then do is add in the side mic. So currently you're only hearing that one, now you're going to hear this one as well, right? So it still doesn't sound, let me just see where the pan on that one is a minute. It still doesn't sound stereo because, as you can see, they're both panned just straight down the middle. To get mid-side, what you do, remember we're using two microphones. We duplicate this track. We make one go right, we make one go left. So we'll call this room side right. All we've done is duplicated that right. Now there are plugins that do this. People tell me there are plugins that will you can just apply the plugin to that track and it'll do it for you. As everyone who watches this show knows, I'm resolutely old school. So now what we get is we've got mid, left, and right. Okay. So I'm just going to play that for you. Still doesn't sound very stereo, does it? Now listen to what happens when I flip the phase on one of those side mics. So that's where you get the stereo image. You put one of them out of phase with the other, and that's classic mid-side processing. Now, what that gives you, why wouldn't you just use two stereo mics pointing out, you know, to get a stereo print of the room? Well, you can do that and it can sound really good. But what you've got here now is independent control over the mid, volume of the mid. So I'll just play that little bit again and bring the volume of the mid, the forward-facing mic, the center mic, up and down. I tend to mix them in pretty low, so I'll demonstrate that. So I'll put them down to nothing and bring them in, right? So I've turned all the other amp mics on now, the 4 mics on the main amps themselves. Now, I'd usually mix them in about -10 or thereabouts for the left and right, and a little bit lower than that for the mid. So what you'll hear is the mix that I normally choose, you'll hear them then brought up to 0 dB or thereabouts, and then go back to where I tend to have them in the mix, right? So. So that's at minus, that's with the room mics lower. Here's with the room mics really loud. And with them lower again. Got to be careful because I'm pushing the levels on the thingy there. So once again, without the room mics. Without room mics only. So that's just an explanation of the mid-side thing again, and just to go back to what it would have been, right, without the mid-side configuration, you get this. Right, so then when we go to full mid-side, so there you go. That was they were up full then again. Why don't we use a full mix of the room mics? Tends to give an unrealistic presentation of the bass. But I get as much of them in there as for cleaner sounds with reverbs and delays. I'll bring the room mics up. For overdrive sounds where it needs to be more direct and punchy, I'll bring the room mics down a bit. Some people say, why don't you just use the room mics and nothing else? Don't think that sounds much like a guitar amp, to be honest. Maybe if they were perfectly positioned in the middle of the room. Anyway, we could talk about that for days. I hope that was useful. That was a look at our audio process and an explanation of the mid-side thing. Cool. All right. Mick out. See you soon.